Rogal Dorn may have slaughtered Alpharius during the Battle of Pluto, but he destroyed more than just a Primarch that day. For all intents and purposes, he ended the 20th Legion itself. And this is very apparent when we look at the current state of the Alpha Legion in Warhammer 40k, as they are not a cohesive whole, despite enduring within the borders of the Imperium for 10,000 years. In this video, we'll look at the events from Praetorian of Dorn that shed light on the situation, from the death of Alpharius at the hands of his brother Rogal Dorn, to the defiance Omegon shows Horus in the wake of the Battle of Pluto. Let's kick this one off right and get straight into the gruesome and gory scene of the death of the 20th Primarch. And suddenly Alpharius was amongst the killing tide, his attacks not following rhythm or pattern. One instant he was in the front rank, the pale spear orbiting him, its blade a blur of blood and smoke as it cut through armor and limbs. The next, he was retreating and lashing out as the Huskarls moved into the space. Then, he was pressing close, hacking and stabbing like the butchers of the World Eaters, then piercing a throat with a thrust that was as light as a breath of wind. Dorn drove into the Lernians, red spattering his face, Storm's teeth shedding blood. Then, with a suddenness that halted the shallow breath in Arcamus' throat, Alpharius' spear thrust up from the press of ranks. Its tip shimmered, silver reflection fading to mist, as Arcamus thought that the sound fled from his ears as it drove at his lord's chest. It was a beautiful strike. In all his years of war, Arcamus had never seen the like, its simplicity like a line drawn by a master artisan on a bare parchment. It was death and ruin, and silence without end. And Storm's teeth met the spear thrust, and reality shrieked. A sheet of silver sparks exploded from the tip at which the two weapons met. Alpharius and Dorn stood before each other, and it was as though the universe made space for this meeting of brothers. "I came here for you, Rogal," said Alpharius as he slid back, spear spinning. Dorn was cutting again and again, and each blow churned the air. "This is about victory. True victory." A Lernian stepped into Dorn's path. Storm's teeth cut up through the torso of the Terminator. Gut fluid and blood gushed out as the dead flesh and armor fell. The Lernians and Huskarls were a shrinking circle around the two Primarchs. "Look at this. Look at what I have done here. This is not a war you can win your way," called Alpharius. Dorn stood before him. The spear was suddenly still as his brother loomed above him, a sculpture of vengeance cast in gold. Dorn sliced downwards. Alpharius raised the spear. The weapons clashed, and suddenly the Alpha Legion Primarch was spinning close, Storm's teeth arcing past him harmlessly. "But you are blind to what you are fighting. We are both fighting for the future, Rogal." Alpharius lunged. Dorn jerked aside, blink fast. The spear tip caught his shoulder and punched through the golden armor. Dorn staggered. "I did this so that you would understand," shouted Alpharius. "So that you would see that you cannot win. I am not here to kill you, brother. I'm not here for Horus. I'm here to give you victory." Dorn was astride in front of Arcamus, blood bright and scattering as he wrenched free of Alpharius' spear. The Huskarls fell, their legs cut out beneath them as Alpharius spun wide, spear arcing low like a scythe through long grass. And now Dorn stood alone, blood running down the gold of his armor. "I know the enemy," said Alpharius. "I know your weakness and theirs. I know the truth." Dorn stepped forwards, Storm's teeth slamming down, battering into the spear blade in a blaze of light. Alpharius slipped to the side and Dorn turned the direction of his cut as it fell. But Alpharius was not where his movement should have taken him. He was behind Dorn's cut, the blade of his spear slicing down. "I can give you victory, brother," Alpharius urged him again. Dorn swayed aside and the spear blade skimmed his chest. Slivers of gold and silver feathers fell to the deck, and Alpharius was overextended. And Dorn was turning, his strength flowing into a wide lateral cut that would never land. It would never land because in that instant Arcamus saw what was about to happen. Alpharius was not overextended. He was exactly where he needed to be to turn past Dorn's blow and make another, last, perfect thrust with his spear. Arcamus felt his blood-drained body try to move faster, try to push itself across the few meters separating him from the Lord, whose life and service were the reason he did not fear. Dorn cut. Storm's teeth blurred. Alpharius swayed back, pivoting and sliding a hair's breadth past the screaming edge. Arcamus lunged to his lord's side, his sea-axe blade reaching for the spear thrust even as it unfolded. His blade caught the haft of Alpharius' spear, and the force of the connection kicked through his metal arm like the kiss of a lightning bolt. Arcamus reeled back, staggering to the deck, and the spear struck home. It rammed through Dorn's armor and into the flesh, and stopped. Dorn stood, unmoved, the spear embedded in his shoulder where he had stepped in to take the blow. His left hand was locked around the spear's haft. For an instant, the two Primarchs were an arm's reach apart, eye to eye. "Brother," Alpharius began, and Dorn hacked Storm's teeth through Alpharius' arms above the wrists. Blood and sparks fell in the flash of gunfire. The world became a slow sliding tableau of movement. Dorn's face, cold stone, marked with blood and strobing shadows as he pulled the spear from his shoulder. Alpharius, staggering, lashed out with a kick. Another cut, scything from left to right, Storm's teeth ripping armor like parchment. Red gloss sheen on indigo blue. And a demigod falling, his torso an open cave of meat and bone. The only sound, the growl of Storm's teeth and the clang as Alpharius struck the deck and began to rise. Strength defying the red ruin of his body, Dorn still had the spear in one hand. But victory, Alpharius gasped. Dorn rammed the spear through his brother's chest. The tip punched through the power plant on the back of Alpharius' armor. Alpharius' mouth opened, his eyes wide. A great wash of blood poured from between his teeth. Dorn held him on the spear, the two so close that it seemed almost an embrace. The air around them was blurring like a heat haze as the blood struck the floor. A high wail was rising with a coil of wind which circled the pair. Alpharius' mouth moved, forming words. Dorn was still for a second, his eyes blank and black in the carved stone of his face. Then he pushed Alpharius away. Snakes of light writhed through the air. The Primarch of the Alpha Legion staggered, mouth still moving. Rogel Dorn brought Storm's teeth around. The blade cut down through Alpharius' skull, then tore free in a spray of blood and a detonation of light. The last planet of the solar system turned in silence. Explosions flashed. Ships glittered like snow falling through a winter night. Lives ended. They ended in small spaces with the air sucked away, and the roar of gunfire pouring through passages, and the spinning blackness where the last sight given to them was the blink of explosions and the light of stars. And they ended in the heart of a moon, with the blood of a being who had been more than human, but less than a god, pooling on a floor of cold iron. Rogel Dorn, Praetorian of Terra, looked down at the corpse of his brother. Around him, the world turned. Groups of warriors appeared in fresh flashes of teleportation light. They spread through the vault as the doors crashed open and Kestros ran in and saw a sight that none would have believed. A moment that should have stopped the galaxy on its axis. A Primarch dead at the hands of his brother, within sight of the world of their creation. But the solar system turned without pause, unknowing or uncaring. And from earlier in the book, we see how Dorn is able to predict the actions of Hydra, something that Alpharius just wouldn't expect due to his massive ego. "You will withdraw your forces from this world," said Dorn. "All of them. The agents and operatives too. I know that you used them, and I know how. I will be looking for them, and if I find any, they will not be spared." Yeah, that's pure egotism, whether it's true or not, but Alpharius does have some points to make, and doesn't flinch under Dorn's scrutiny of his legion and its methods. The moral high ground is not with Dorn, despite his unwavering belief that it is, which is easily pointed out by the Hydra. But it doesn't really seem like being considered a hypocrite is something that really bothers Rogel Dorn and the Imperial Fists. Alpha Legion forces had been sighted in the weeks that followed. A wing of armor had swept out of the ash wastes. to lend their aid to the assault on a primary surface hub of the planet's subterranean tunnel network. Scattered reports had placed warriors in variations of Alpha Legion colors in multiple battle zones. Dorn had pressed on, and hive by hive the world had continued to fall. But a core of resistant hives remained, centered around the seat of the World Prince. On the eve of a renewed assault to take the last hives, the World Prince had sent a signal surrendering. In the course of a single hour, all of his direct blood relatives had been killed. The assassin in each case had been someone trusted and close to the slain. At the end of that hour, the World Prince had given his world to the Imperium, and 401 members of the planet's ruling nobility were dead. Alpharius shrugged, the enameled scales of his armor shimmering with the gesture's movement. We did not need to kill them. That is true. We could have waited for you to grind your way through their troops, step by tedious step. The future cannot be won by a war waged in shadows. It will not be won any other way. Then that future will be dead before it can begin. Do not moralize at me, brother, spat Alpharius. And now it was his turn to flick from control to anger. Would the deaths of all those you would have killed been acceptable because they died in open battle? Yes, said Dorn. Alpharius held Dorn's gaze. I think we see the universe very differently, Rogel. No, I do not think you see the same universe at all. They looked at each other, both of their faces set, so similar for all their differences. The end matters, said Alpharius at last. Victory matters. Everything else is just delusion. With victory, we can build dreams, but without victory, they remain just dreams. Dorn shook his head and began to turn towards the doors. Arcamus moved with him. He could feel the pressure of his lord's anger arcing through the air like cold from a glacier. Dorn stopped at the doors and turned back. Your initial strikes were misdirected, he said to Alpharius. You infiltrated one hive and made it fall by systematic destabilizing of authority, but you should have waited. You could have used it as a node from which to disperse your human operatives and agents into the other hives. You managed that to a degree, but you could have forced a total collapse in their defenses across the planet, not just surrender by assassination. That move was also mistimed. Another 37 hours and the pressure from our assault would have been eroding their ability to communicate. Secondary psychological fear, doubt, and confusion would have been rising to a peak. You could have ridden that, played and controlled its pace, forcing hives to fall or change sides at the exact moment when it would amplify whatever effect you wanted. What you did was effective, but it was not optimally so by your own criteria. Dorn stared at Alpharius, but the Alpha Legion Primarch did not reply. I know you, brother, continued Dorn. I knew that you were here before I walked through the door. I knew it was you on that throne, not because you made an error in your masquerade. You made no mistake. Yet I still knew it was you. Think on that, brother. It is not that I do not understand what you are or what you do. I understand both. We are what we choose to be. So we see Rogel Dorn understands Alpharius, and this is something that comes into play later, when he crushes his brother in close combat and utterly destroys him. Dorn is not confused by, nor is he distracted by, Alpharius. He knows what the Hydra is going to do as much as he knows himself and what he is going to do. The main advantage Alpharius typically wields over others is not an advantage he has over Dorn. But Dorn doesn't know about the existence of Omegon. So, the Alpha Legion is effectively still under the control of a Primarch, something that would come as a surprise to Rogel, I'm sure, if he were to learn the truth. In other books, we see Malcador poking at Dorn, as he obviously is aware of the death of Alpharius, but Dorn never told anyone, and his Huskarls are sworn to secrecy, even among the Imperial Fists. And there are a lot of hints throughout the lore that Alpharius' words did get to Dorn a bit, and have him second-guessing, and perhaps even regretting slaying his brother. But how it affects Omegon is insane, a trap he has fallen into that he knows he will never escape from. For all intents and purposes, Omegon is the one who died. As he takes up the mantle of Alpharius and becomes him, I doubt that he ever used the name Omegon again. Omegon woke. He had never slept, had never dreamed or felt the tug of mortal fatigue in all the days of his existence. Yet here he was, waking from black oblivion, the cold deck of the ship beneath him, the darkness of his arming chamber close about him. The pulse of the Beta's engines was a distant rumble on the edge of silence. Coldness poured through his flesh. Moisture beaded his skin. He could taste blood in his mouth, thick and harsh with iron. His hands were numb, his fingers hooked as though grasping something that had vanished. He moved the fingers and then brought them up to his face. Sharp needles of pain prickled beneath his touch. And then a new feeling came. Crushing in its weight, undeniable in its truth, even though he could not tell how it had arrived. He was alone. Words began to form on his tongue, but the door to the chamber was already opening. Arcus stood in the light from the door, his battleplate humming as he stepped within. "Lord Omegon," Arcus said, bowing his head briefly, then stopping as his eyes fell on the Primarch. "Is there something wrong?" No. Is there..." He blinked. Cold spirals of light wormed briefly at the edge of sight. "Alone." "Is there word from Lord Alpharius?" Omegon asked, still looking at his hands. He could sense Arcus's frown without needing to see it. "None," he said. "But there's something else." Omegon looked up, the muscles of his neck cold as they moved. "War Master Horus wishes to consult directly with Lord Alpharius." "Do we have any indication of what his concern is?" "No, Lord," said Arcus. "Our sources within the War Master's court have become unreliable." Omegon nodded, glancing over his shoulder as though he had heard something in the empty dark. "Prepare the Metatron," he said. "I will speak with my brother." Arcus nodded, his gaze lingering on his Primarch for an instant before he left. Alone. Omegon armored himself, the blind servitors bolting the plates of his armor over his flesh as the numbness in his hands and neck became a smoldering pain. I am alone. The knowledge rose through the coldness of his thoughts, certain and inescapable, though he could not say how he knew that it was fact, not fear. He had never been alone, not truly. Even from the first spark of a thought in his consciousness, he had known that he was one of many, a fragment of a greater whole, a piece of a great destiny. And now, he walked from his armory, the scaled and crested helm of the Primarch of the Alpha Legion under his arm. Arcus was waiting in the sealed chamber where they kept the Metatron. Omegon nodded, and the attendants began to unbolt the mask from the one-time astropath's head. He watched as the famine-thin figure writhed, ghost light and smoke pouring from its mouth to form a shadow in the air above it, a shadow with a face and form. Frost spread across the floor and up his armor. He bowed his head even as the shadow turned to look at him. What had happened? What was happening? What was he now? And he realized that the words he was about to say would trap him for the rest of existence. The jest turned into mocking truth. I am Alpharius, he said. What is your will, my war master? And when Omegon, posing as his brother, met with the War Master Horus Lupercal to explain his actions and report on the success or failure of his mission, we see the Primarch of the Alpha Legion showing us all the truth about the 20th. They're dead, gone, ineffective, incapable of being what they were because they are now shattered. Horus considers the 20th Legion lost, as does Omegon. But their conversation, if you can call it that, is beyond insane. Pure intimidation is just rolling off Horus, and Omegon strides right up, whips his balls out, and drops them on the table, totally smashing it. Alpharius walked forwards and stopped a pace from Horus. The only weapon he bore was a sheathed dagger at his waist, the grip fashioned in the shape of two intertwined snakes. Scales covered his armor, glinting iridescent blue, and a helm with a low crest hid his face. He did not remove it. You bring me no warriors, brother. They did not perish at the gates of Terra, and yet they are not here. So what do you come to lay at your War Master's feet?" Alpharius did not reply, but simply took a small black and brass cylinder from a recess in his armor. Data sockets gleamed at either side of the rod. Alpharius held it out. Horus looked at him, his focus bleeding out into the air around him. Argonis winced at the pressure in his skull. Horus gestured, and Argonis stepped forwards to take the data cylinder. Alpharius held up his free hand, and the gesture was somehow enough to freeze Argonis in mid-stride. Horus and Alpharius remained still, looking at each other, the Master of Serpents seeming small beneath the undiluted focus of the War Master. Argonis wondered how anything could remain still under that gaze. Then slowly, without breaking his focus, Horus reached out and took the cylinder. Alpharius nodded. Horus tossed it to Argonis, who slotted it into an isolated cogitator. Cogs clattered, discs of silver spun, and then cones of hololight unfolded in the air. First came the great body of the sun, and then its planets, each blooming to dominate the view before shrinking as their siblings were added. Moons, orbital habitats, drifts of void stations, and fortresses glimmered into view. Data shone in halos around them, flowing with strength specifications, tactical weaknesses, and threat reaction parameters. Argonis recognized the image. It was a strategic view of the solar system, but threaded and woven with information on every detail of its defenses, from communication response times to main troop strengths. It was staggering, a treasure of intelligence from the heart of Rogaldorn's fortress. Horus did not look at it, as though he had known what Alpharius would bring. "You have my thanks," said Horus. Behind them, the projection of the solar system spun, its secrets unfolding like flowers in sunlight. "You have done as I asked, but come alone. Where's your legion?" Alpharius did not move for a long moment. Reflections of the display flowed across the green lenses of his helm. Then he drew the knife from his waist. The motion was simple, not a grand flourishing or threat-filled flash, but still the Justarin twitched. Horus did not move. Alpharius held the dagger up. It was long and double-edged. Twin serpents etched on the blade to match the grip, one coiling towards the hilt, one towards the tip. Alpharius held it still for a second, then reached up with his other hand. He gripped the blade. Rager edges bit into ceramite. Argonis realized what he was going to do an instant before the blade shattered in Alpharius' grasp. He opened his hand. The slivers of metal fell between the fingers like sharp petals of a crushed rose. Then he dropped the dagger's hilt at Horus's feet, turned, and walked towards the door. The Justarin moved to stop him, but Horus gave a small shake of his head. "No," he said. "Let him go." A total beast! Nobody handled the War Master like the twins. This is an absolute baller move by Alpharius. Just as badass as when Alpharius threatened to slay Abaddon and Erebus right in front of Horus. And one reason why I love the twins so much. Why the Hydra is not to be messed with. They can wield power as easily as their brother Primarchs wield power weapons. So we ultimately can conclude from Praetorian of Dorn and the events surrounding the death of the Primarch of the 20th Legion and the rise of his twin, that it was in fact the Legion that died. They still had an acting Primarch, but that whole thing with the dagger was not so subtle of a metaphor, which explains the Alpha Legion and its structure in the current timeline of Warhammer 40k. They are indeed a shattered whole. Too bad Dorn slew a loyal brother, only doing his job of infiltration. Truly tragic and absolutely grimdark indeed. It's funny, on my video about how the Dropsite Massacre book confirmed the Alpha Legion were loyal, so many people responding with so many whataboutisms. How can they be loyal? What about when they... fill in the blank. All I can say, other than if you want to make an omelet, you need to break a few eggs, is Professor Snape literally killed Dumbledore to maintain cover and ultimately is seen as a hero for his infiltration of Voldemort's inner circle. Why can't this simple logic be applied to the Alpha Legion? Anyway, There's really only one reason, and one reason alone, and that's people get exceptionally attached to their preconceived notions. Remember, kids, the Alpha Legion may be all over the place now, as far as loyalty is concerned, but during the Heresy era, they were commanded by their Primarchs, and loyal to a fault to them, no matter what they were asked to do. With Alpharius gone and Omegon taking the name, effectively becoming Alpharius, we have a loyalist Primarch leading what remains of a crumbling legion that has crossed the Rubicon and become something they can never unbecome. Traitorous heretics that are to be hunted down and destroyed lest their taint spread throughout the Imperium. The Legion may be a bunch of shattered pieces, like the dagger, but it will never be wielded as a single blade again, was what I took from Omegon's display when he dropped the hilt of the dagger at the feet of Horus. But it seems that Solomon Akura wasn't aware of this, and he may just be the force that can reforge that blade and wield it with a single purpose once again. After all, he did secure both the blade and the haft of the Pale Spear, reuniting the Primarch's weapon with the Legion. It may just be time for the Hydra to rise once again. The Alpha Legion proved they are doing everything they do for the Emperor in the new novel Dropsite Massacre. They may have to get their hands dirty and do the unthinkable, sometimes the outright heretical, but they are indeed confirmed to be loyal still. Sure, they're infiltrators and spies and the best of the best at espionage. And to keep their cover, and not be straight up killed by Horus in the 16th Legion, they have to act as though they are indeed believers in the War Master's cause. Nobody walks such a razor-thin line as the Alpha Legion, for if the traitors find out of their true intentions, they are dead. And every one of the Loyalist Legions sees them as traitors themselves, and so will kill them on sight. And this, my friends, is just how the Sons of the Hydra like it. Okay, so there are a lot of revelations in this book, from several scenes, and I'm going to read them all in this video, or at least talk about them in the case of some of the lesser events, though each adds their own bit of flavor and adds to the overall context. So, without further ado, here's the first scene in the book featuring the Alpha Legion, and it has Alpharius, Omegon, and Ingo Peck speaking with Horus. Although Horus only thinks he has Alpharius on the phone, as he has no clue Omegon even exists. Thoros the Davenite of the Serpent Lodge is able to use the warp to communicate demonically through astropaths that are possessed, something that is new to the Legions and the Primarchs at this time. This may be the first demon-assisted warp call we see in the series chronologically, and the astropath is arching, lips pulling back from teeth, vertebrae popping. The black coil above Thoros' hand is a serpent of night, a sinuous hole into nothing. The priest hisses. The snake of darkness whips out. It touches the astropath's flayed chest and coils into the spiral wound left there. A shriek roars from the astropath's throat. Then the astropath is silent and still. He lowers his head. He's not blind now. Red eyes glisten in his sockets. Slit pupils widen as they move across the chamber. They linger on Malachurst, and a smile cracks the face to show teeth. Then the gaze moves to Horus. War Master. Flecks of gray ash fall from the mouth as it speaks the word. The voice is a rattle-rasp of dry skin and scales. Horus holds the red gaze and then looks at Thoros. Command it and it will obey, says the priest. Horus shifts his gaze back to the red eyes. I wish to speak to my brother Alpharius. Kelephos, or whatever Kelephos is now, bows its head. It shall be, it says. It inhales. Ribs crack in its chest. It rises from the plinth into the air. Its eyes are shut, but a red glow dances behind them. Malachurst does not understand the unlogic of what is happening. He knows about the totems sent with the help of Erebus and the 17th Legion to their hidden allies. Small things, a ragged-edged coin, a droplet of amber containing a human tooth, a scrap of soft thread that could be mistaken for silk but is not. All of them carried and given to astropaths scattered across the Imperium. Small things, scratches on the skin of the universe, enough to break the limits of reality. He wonders what is happening at the outer edge of this communion, If across the dark reaches of space another astropath is burning, hands clutching a totem that they were told to keep close. The thing that was astropath Kelephos opens its eyes again and speaks. "Brother," says the voice of Alpharius. "You wish to talk?" On the Alpha, Ingo Peck watches as the astropath burns. Their mouth is still moving in the skull even as the skin peels from the bone. Their vocal cords are cooking, so the voice of Horus is a rasp, the sound of a man speaking his last while he drowns in his own blood. "How they respond and win," says the voice of Horus. "That is the balance point of victory. It cannot be left to chance." Alpharius is not looking at the burning astropath, but at his twin, who is leaning against the chamber wall opposite. Horus believes he is talking to one Primarch, but in fact he is talking to both Alpharius and Omegon. Those outside the Alpha Legion see at its head only a single son of the Emperor, the existence of one hidden by their duplication of the other. They are a single being divided, so close in thought and appearance that they can jointly hold a conversation with Horus and be indistinguishable. Hand gestures flick meaning back and forth between the twin Primarchs, almost faster than Peck can follow. It is a dance of strategic thought, unfolding in real time while the corpse of an Immaterium-infected psyker speaks for Horus and burns alive. "Uncertainty, chaos, ignorance, and secrets," says Horus. "We're in your land now, brother, your home. Do you believe that you can find a path through it faster than our enemy?" "I do not believe it," says Alpharius. "I know it." Horus laughs, and the slowly immolating astropath spasms as the sound emerges from its throat. "Of course, my mistake." Omegon's hand forms a single sign. "Careful." "The situation is fluid and riven with unknowns. That is true," continues Alpharius aloud. "Rogel has shouted the news of war into the night and called for all who hear to bring retribution. He does not know who has heard, or who can or will respond. There's no plan, no manifest of forces in material," continues Omegon. "The gap in speech between the two Primarchs speaking is so seamless that the words seem to come from one mouth. He knows he is at war. He knows that he has a narrow window to end this before it propagates, but everything else is uncertainty and shifting sand." "Uncomfortable for him," says Alpharius, "but a perfect situation for us. Because one factor will shape the nature and speed of the assault." "Which of our brothers grips the situation first?" finishes Omegon. "There are 18 legions. The bulk of 4 stand with Horus on the surface of Istvan, 5. 4 more, the Iron Warriors, Night Lords, Word Bearers, and Alpha Legion, have pledged to his cause in secret. Of the 9 that remain, only a few will be able to hear and respond to Dorn's call. Ignorance, deception, exhaustion, and distance will keep 5 out of consideration. And Dorn's Legion is tied to the throne world. That leaves 3 and their Primarchs, the Iron Hands, Salamanders, and Raven Guard, with Ferrus Manus, Vulcan, and Korax in command of each. All is different from each other as metal is from fire or feather." "Ferrus," says the voice of Horus into the brief silence. "No, too neat," signs Omegon. "The harder they go in," replies Alpharius, "the higher the uncertainty parameters, the higher the loss margin. Annihilation does not allow for survival, but an approximate to that annihilation with openings, acceptable, desirable, potentially." Both Primarchs pause. Peck has lost the thread of exactly what they were referring to, as though the signs were only the surface of chains of thought that were anticipating each other. Potential for future unseen actors and forces is the primary parameter. Agreed. We should reprioritize that. The rest can float in open parameters. Yes, cross-mission parameter interference is a factor, but yes. Agreed. The outcome will be as you command, War Master, says Omegon aloud. "I have no doubt, brother," says the voice of Horus. "See it done." The fire that has been roaring through the astropath vanishes. They try to breathe, but their lungs are already cooked. They shiver, curled, and fetal. Something in their nervous system is still alive enough to reach a hand across the deck. The flesh is shriveled back from the fingernails. "Peck?" It's Omegon. Both Primarchs are looking at their first captain, mirrored questions on their faces. "There are assets in place to disrupt communication as needed," he says. His throat is dry and his spit tastes of smoke. But operating conditions are challenging. Alpharius glances at the astropath as they give a final shiver and their body sags to stillness. Nothing that cannot be overcome or made into an advantage. Indeed, says Peck. And he is right, of course, says Omegon. Horus, I mean. It is a realm of chaos out there now, and who else besides us is ready for it? Then the next scene has an Alpha Legion regular mortal human agent sabotaging a comms relay station and disrupting the astropathic choir that is relaying messages for the Imperium. This results in some interesting things, as Vulcan would probably have been able to temper the fury of Ferrus Manus a bit if they'd have been able to talk, but nobody could reach Vulcan. But here's the comms that were between the other legions in the Alpha Legion. At this point, the Loyalists don't know about the traitors in their midst, so are including Perturabo, Lorgar, Alpharius, and Kurz in their planning. And I think it is so funny what Alpharius has to say. He literally tells them it is a trap, don't fall for it. He goes out of his way to warn the Loyalists, because he's the Emperor's double agent. I can't imagine how nail-biting that must be, to be in the presence of Horus and deceive him on the regular. That has to be one hell of an adrenaline rush. So, here's the comms, starting with Alpharius talking to Corax. 20-19. The distribution of forces by Horus implies that he is baiting this attack. No doubt he intends striking the rear of an attacking force with the so far absent warships. To plunge into such a prepared ambush is insanity. Ferrus must see this. A strategy of isolation, blockade, force degrading, and prolonged siege is the only method that will end in anything other than great loss. I am not and never have been close enough to Ferrus that my voice would make him deviate from a course of action. You and I have in some ways differed on many matters, but I believe you will agree with me on this. He will listen to you, or you and Vulcan. We must stop this. 19-20. Ferrus is cognizant of the situation, believe me. There's no time to let matters proceed more slowly, and the only way to contain such a rebellion is to end it now. However, I agree I am concerned about the clarity with which he might be seeing things. Fulgrim's betrayal cuts deep with him. 20-19. If there is a window to turn this aside, it is now. I leave you with one question. Even if Ferrus's plan is effective, fully effective, what will be left of the forces sent to enact it? What will be left of us? End of transmission sequence. Astropathic transmission sequence commences. 20-10. Plan for direct assault is dangerous on multiple levels. A strategy of containment and blockade will be superior. Force Horus to surrender and bring him and the others in chains to the throne. Then there will be no doubt that both their cause is false and their strength nothing. Execution might as easily be defeat as victory. Horus may fall and in death become an idea which will not die. Break a sword and it shatters into many sharp pieces. 10-20. No, we act now. We burn this treachery to its ashes, and then we scour the ashes for those who might follow. No mercy, no hesitation, no respite. End of transmission sequence. Astropathic transmission sequence commences. 19-20. I have had no reply from Vulcan. This disturbs me, brother. I am backing Ferrus's commands, but your concerns echo with my own. We move forward, but with reluctance. Can there be another way in such a time? Have you a notion of what keeps Vulcan silent? Something in the shadow of my thoughts cannot help but think that calamity has befallen him. 20-19. The suspicion of malignancy and misfortune is the only guard against it. There is always grounding for such fear. I can only say that I have no intelligence that a calamity has befallen Vulcan or his legion yet. End of transmission sequence. Yeah, Alpharius totally warned them. Don't listen to Ferrus, he'll get us all killed. And they didn't listen to Alpharius. To be fair though, to those who would argue that the 20th Primarch is indeed the traitor he's made out to be, we can see that he did know his opinion would be distrusted. Just playing devil's advocate. I know the truth about the Hydra. So the next scene, we see an Alpha Legionnaire that is embedded within a Salamander's team and is sort of an exchange student, which apparently is a thing that all the legions did and learned from one another. "Are you intending on dropping to the surface from there?" comes a voice. It is a local Vox signal. He looks up from the drop. A warrior in pearlescent blue is standing beside the launch station. "It was the only way I could think of avoiding your company," he replies. The adepts are on their feet again, working controls. The blast doors in the floor are closing. Haliscus drops down and lands as the last sliver view of Istvan V vanishes. Jets of air begin to fill the launch bay with atmosphere. The warrior in blue has already removed his helmet. Underneath, his face is another echo of those worn by most of the rest of his legion. A tri-headed hydra writhes across his left cheek, the jaws of one head locked around the eye socket. "Your plan seems to have failed," he says. "It always seems to." Haliscus pulls his own helmet off and grins as he grips the Alpha Legionnaire's hand. His name is Hesperides, and he has been attached to the Dracosian and its warhost for the last 3 years. The exchange of warriors, even of units, between legions is a tradition as old as the legions themselves, though the custom rarely sees use between the Alpha Legion and its older siblings. But Vulcan, ever the conciliator, had sent an honor company to serve under Alpharius' command for the Nitrex campaign, and the 20th had reciprocated by sending warriors to serve alongside the Salamanders. Hesperides is one such warrior. Other legions might have seen a single warrior as an insult when other legions exchanged units or even companies between them. Haliscus had seen it that way at first, but time and shared suffering had broken those doubts. Hesperides had been there with Haliscus for the long winter of the Caspador siege. It had been the Alpha Legionnaire's insight that had saved them from the enslaver deception on Vortis, and he had been among the warriors who had carried Haliscus back to the lines after an Eldari fusion blast had almost killed him. "The second wave fleet has begun to translate," says Hesperides. Haliscus can see the command alert sigils flashing through his helm display now. "Your legion is here?" asks Haliscus. Hesperides nods. "I am to remain with the Dracosian and facilitate drop coordination." "Meaning that you're going to make sure that we get out of the way in time for your kin to come in all guns blazing?" Hesperides gives the smallest of shrugs. "With most of the first wave command on the ground, the possibility of coordination error is high." "Well, it's good we have you then." "Isn't it?" says Hesperides with a grin. "You have Vox connection with your fleet already. They must have made the link as soon as their first ships translated. The Legion always anticipates while others wait to act. Possibly, but we all behave with less satisfied smugness." Hesperides ignores the jibe. He's looking at the empty hangar bay. "All units deployed?" "For us, yes. The ship will be shifting to outer orbit while the Titan ships and bulk troop haulers come in." "And then moving back in to take on the craft returning from the surface?" asks Hesperides. Haliscus frowns. Hesperides was there at the mission briefings, but he's checking details that he already knows or can observe. It reminds Haliscus of a warrior fiddling with a gun mechanism just before an assault, checking for the sake of checking. It's out of character. He wonders what exactly was in those first signals from the Alpha Legion fleet. Of all the legions, the 20th is supposed to have the most developed information-gathering abilities. Is there a tactical factor they have discovered that they're not willing to share? That was always the shadow that clung to the Alpha Legion, that they valued secrets above kinship. He cuts the thought away. It is unworthy. All legions have their secrets, even the Salamanders. "Any concerns from your legion?" Hesperides shook his head. "Nothing fundamental," he says. A rueful grin replaces his brief frown. "Just our hunger for clarity and precision." Asset on board the 18th Legion vessel Dracosian confirms in place and standing by. Mission parameter acknowledged. That bro story between the Salamander Haliscus and the Alpha Legionnaire Hesperides continues throughout the novel, and is almost like a dark mirror of the bro-off that Rogel Dorn and Constantine Valdor have in The End and the Death. Now we start to get into the more revelatory material, as the bandage gets torn right off and we get to see behind the curtain, or some other appropriate metaphor. Ingo Peck's arc is awesome in this book, it really is. If you appreciated this character in the Siege of Terra series, then you'll probably like what you get in this book. If there truly is a literal physical third head of the Hydra, it is the first captain. The Master of Signals looks up from his instruments. Ingo Peck acknowledges the update with a nod and turns to Omegon. The Primarch is armored, face already hidden by a helm. The scales covering the surface of his battle plate shift the fall of light subtly so that the eye wants to skate over them rather than focus. Lorgar has called a council, and so Alpharius must appear. Whether one or either or neither of the twin Primarchs will go to war in that guise, Peck does not know. They have not said, and he has no reason to ask. 82% of operatives are in communication. The other assets have yet to make contact. Most are unable to make active Vox contact and are running under their last given parameters. I am aware, Peck. Peck nods at the soft rebuke, expression composed. Omegon tilts his head, bird-like, gaze fixed on the first captain. Misgivings? Peck nods. Better the truth than the lie that will be detected. Some. Omegon nods and looks up to where the sensorium screens show the sphere of space close to the Alpha Legion. There are ships still coming from the warp. Warships and transports, thousands of them, more than were in Ferrus Manus' first wave. Peck follows his Primarch's gaze as a squadron of Night Lords vessels come into view. Look at them, quotes Omegon softly. So come Death's children cloaked as ragged and bloody beggars with knives as smiles. Peck knows the line. It is the oracle speech from the Cycle of Dying Kings. Terran, 23rd millennium, author unknown. He stays silent and watches. Iron-souled and iron-hearted, continues Omegon, as ships of the Iron Warriors break into reality, warp-light clinging to their hulls. Deluded and fire-blinded. The Word-Bearers' fleets are at the fore of the forming armada, their largest ships spread out and dragging their lesser siblings like heralds in front of a procession. And yet who are these without faces who walk unseen amongst the feats? Surely there must be devilry in such emptiness. And then when the last Raven Guard vessels show up late, the Raptoria and the Black Eagle, they are too late to join the ground assault and get hailed by the Alpha Legion as they fall into the wakes of the Iron Warriors and Imperial Army forces that are just arriving as well. Signal from the Alpha Legion, calls a Vox officer. Originator identified as First Captain Peck. Suggests sending liaison forces to Raven Guard vessels that have joined the second wave. 20th Legion have forces in proximity if we do not. Of course they do, says Foryx. He is tempted to discard Peck's suggestion, but it is a contingency he has already considered, and the 20th are suited to such actions. Signal assent, he says. They can board if we close. He shifts his focus back to the main concern. They need the drop sphere clear of the first wave ships. They also need to position their own vessels ready to board, disable or destroy all the Emperor-loyal ships in orbit. No one can escape. It must be fast and efficient murder, a massacre in the void to mirror that on the ground, and they need their victims' unwitting cooperation to do it. Amongst all the Primarchs, it seems only Perturabo, ever the bearer of unwanted tasks, has grasped both the necessity and the challenge of the void element of this engagement. The coordination of the second wave drop is therefore his, and in turn, that means it is Foryx's burden to bear. He does not relish the task. In truth, he delights in none of what they are doing. Like so much of what the Iron Warriors have done, it is simply a grim necessity. And then the story shifts to other matters for a while, before returning us to the Void, to the Alpha Legion's operations, and to Ingo Peck. And this is where the intrigue really gets cranked up, and where the 20th Legion shines the brightest. If he is honest, and Admiral Clave is never less than honest with himself, he does not like the Lord of Iron's order to keep many of the first wave ships in close orbit. Once the second wave has arrived, the ships of the first wave were supposed to cycle out, but resupplying as they did and assume picket positions across the orbital approaches. That was the principle. Perturabo's orders do not negate that, but they mean holding many more of the first wave warships in orbit than Clave had expected. He does not like it, but he does not see how he could contradict or even question it. Priority alert signal incoming, Admiral, calls a communications officer. Clave shakes himself, looks up, nods. Connected. The audio implant in the base of his skull blazes and then a voice speaks. It is calm, smooth, with the bass note signature of a space marine. Admiral, this is First Captain Peck of the 20th Legion. Please accept my apologies for the directness of this communication. Peck. Clave knows the name, though it rings with less renown than that of the first captains of other legions. He has only had peripheral contact with the Alpha Legion in his career. Most of what he knows are the same rumors and stories as everyone else, except he is old enough and wary enough to treat those stories with more suspicion than their subjects. First Captain, to what do I owe this honor? My apologies again, Admiral. I am currently inbound to the Keturah. With me is Delegatus Grelth of the 4th Legion. Admiral, calls the Master of Auspex. Ship closing at speed ahead of the second wave armada. Hull and class unknown. It's small. Beacon identifies it as the Perseus. How are we only picking it up now? Asks Jimenez. It's practically at gun range. Clave catches his executive officer's eye and sketches XX in the air with a finger. Understood, he says into the Vox. Can I ask what your purpose is, First Captain? Fleet coordination and integration. The Lords Alpharius and Perturabo wish to make sure that no lack of clarity in orders or their execution impedes operations. Clave feels his pride bristle. His lips purse. Understood, he replies. Am I to interpret this as a relay of direct orders from the Lord Primarchs? Yes, says Peck. Another pause. Very well. It's an honor to comply and to serve. I think we can all agree, Admiral, there is little of honor left on such a day. Regret, duty perhaps, but not honor. Clave blinks. He's not certain how to reply for a second. Close and link to ship command for docking, he says finally. Fidelitas Imperialis. Fidelitas Imperialis, says Peck. For the Emperor. On the Perseus, Peck hears the Vox link cut with a click. He lets the silence of the ship resettle around him as he walks into the hangar. The Iron Warrior's Delegatus is there, along with his 5 guards, all in heavy Mark II armor. They all have the unit marks of one of the 4th's boarding elite. They might as well have stenciled, "We're here to kill you," on their chests, mutters Peck to himself. Shielded inside his helm, no one else hears. The Delegatus has his back turned and only turns when Peck is 5 paces away. He alone is not wearing a helm. Chewed scar tissue runs from neck to shaved scalp. His mouth looks like it was ripped by a chain blade. He is every inch the personification of the 4th Legion's lack of subtlety. He looks at Peck, dips his head in what Peck thinks is as close as things are going to get to a salute. First Captain, he says. The voice has the grit edge of a reconstructed voice box. Delegatus Grelth, Peck replies. Did they swallow it? Admiral Clave is aware of our arrival and we are cleared to board the Keturah. Grelth snorts. He looks around at the warriors who are standing close by. Load and ready. From here no speech, not even on the Vox. My commands only. The Iron Warriors salute, knuckles hammering into ceramite as one. Grelth turns back to Peck, bullet gouged sneer still in place. You can stop worrying, he growls. I'm not going to break our deception. We will be dutiful silence itself. Trust me. He extends a hand. Peck looks at it and notices that 3 of the fingers are augmetics. The Iron Warrior tilts his head. You have the command rank and situation expertise, First Captain. This is your slice of war. We follow your lead in this, so you can put aside that sneer you're hiding behind that helm. Peck takes the hand, feels the metal digits clamp his forearm. Situation expertise, he repeats coolly. Is that a way of saying that we are better at the murder of former allies? Grelth shakes his head. Peck realizes that the Delegatus' expression never changes, except in the micro muscles around his eyes. Why would I say that? At the order of my Primarch, I have killed 5 of my own Legion brothers. Men of the same iron and blood. How many have you killed, First Captain? Are you goading me or mocking me, Delegatus? A little of both. But no, what I meant was that I am an Iron Warrior. Above all, we know ourselves and know our limits. The scar tissue twists over his teeth. And I am not good at lying. You are. The hull vibration changes pitch. Both of the Space Marines look up a second before the docking klaxon begins to sound. Peck's own entourage are filling into the embarkation space. 10 Alpha Legionnaires, standard armament, nothing to raise concern. One of the reasons it is Peck leading the operation is that a first captain could be expected to have a slightly larger honor guard. A great clang echoes through the hull as the docking cradle takes hold of the Perseus and pulls it close to the Keturah. "Do you wish you were going down there?" asks Grelth, stamping a foot on the deck as though the surface of Istvan 5 was just on the other side. "No," says Peck. "Neither do I." Warning lights begin to flash around the blast door, closing off the embarkation hold. Data says that the unfortunates that we are here to put down are winning at the moment. So yeah, Peck and Grelth are ostensibly there to betray the Admiral and set the fleet up for destruction, but we know how this goes and that Ingo Peck is not what he seems. The next passage from the book, while incredibly short, is extremely revealing. On the Alpha, Omegon and Alpharius have not been seen by their senior commanders for hours. No alarm is sounded. Nothing changes. All is set. The bullet fired long ago has left the gun. There's nothing to do but wait for it to reach its target. And as we'll see, that's because Alpharius and Omegon both are out in the field, acting in their respective roles. But in this story, in so many ways, Ingo Peck is the star player. Admiral Clave watches as the lead elements of the Second Wave Armada slot into place above the battle site. It is, he allows, a marvel. One that only a few have the knowledge to appreciate and fewer the opportunity to actually witness. Squadrons of Legion ships drop into orbit, cut speed, and begin their launch cycles. Night Lords' barks and Grand Cruisers, Iron Warriors' battleships, Alpha Legion and Word Bearers' strike cruisers, all moving past and around each other with perfect unity. The auxiliary and macro transplants have been shifted to distant orbit, sandwiched between those in low orbit and a screen of warships hanging in the deep void. All arrayed and arranged with precision. Clave is beginning to feel the tension in him dissipating. Soon, this will be over. "Signal all first wave ships to cease bombardment," he says. His ordnance officer has just handed him an alert that the Lex mechanics and bombardment masters cannot designate clean targets on the ground. "Too many ground units of all sides too close together," says Peck from just behind him. Clave jumps. His exoframe clatters. He looks at the Alpha Legion First Captain. How could something so large get so close without him noticing? Peck gives a small smile. The shipmasters of the other ships will have already reached the same conclusion. Clave checks the fleet command feed, frowns. None of the second wave are guns ready to take over surface support. Did an order go out that was not shared? Peck nods towards where Delegatus Grelth is examining a data screen. No doubt. Clave feels his unease return. He does not know why the Alpha Legionnaire has begun this exchange. It feels pointed, but without point. Clave does not like that. Still. "Delegatus," he calls. "First wave fleet elements are about to cease fire on the surface. Are your ships in place to take over?" Grelth looks around. There's a glitter of contempt in his eyes. "Bombardment will commence once targets are clear," he says. "The ship is ready to pull off the orbital line, Admiral," says the helm officer. Clave purses his lips, brings a brass-framed digit up to tap his teeth. "Belay command," he says. "Keep us on the line until we're at 1/3 bombardment magazine capacity." "An unnecessary action," says Grelth. "We still have viable targets on the main fortress and munitions in our magazines. Your duty is not to—" "My duty is to bring death to those who have broken faith with the Imperium," says Clave, anger snapping through his voice. "I will not relinquish that until I must." He stops, holds himself tall in his exoframe, meets the black eyes in their scar-tissued face. He's aware of all the command crew watching and listening. He holds Grelth's gaze and lets the words hang. He has not realized how angry he was until that moment. Then, much later in the story, the Alpha Legion's shenanigans start to really show, and we come back to Peck and Grelth and Admiral Clave again. And this plot thread gets pretty wild from here on out, as the psycho-conditioning that the Alpha Legion uses is on full display here. The lore implications will reverberate all throughout the entirety of Warhammer, but before we see that play out, we see some other, though related, Alpha Legion action. And we see them use a tool that is seldom used by the 20th in this book, the open hand of blatant treachery. Still, this tool is ultimately utilized to save lives, and to make sure the Loyalists endure despite the best efforts of the War Master. Seated throughout all the fleets are Alpha Legionnaires that are part of the foreign exchange student program and are aboard the various vessels of the Legiones Astartes. But in truth, they are there as saboteurs and assassins. Or so Lord Perturabo thinks when he's going over the moment and the game plan as he arrives at Istvan V. Horus asks him to come to the planet's surface, so he's letting his fleet's command crew know the situation in space and on the ground for that matter. Final elements in descent, says Clave, standing by to shift orbit. Belay that command, Admiral, says Peck, his tone casual, courteous. Clave frowns. Peck knows he is about to say what the battle schemes from the second wave required him to shift back and close with the ships of the 4th Legion's auxiliary vessels to start resupply of macro munitions. Peck gives a tiny flick of his eyes in the direction of Delegatus Grelth. Clave pauses, then nods. Just for a moment, says Peck. Stand by. He half turns away to hide his jaw and neck muscles tensing as he sub-vocalizes into his Vox link. The connection is instantaneous and clear. Parameter expedition immediate. Dionysus. On the Dracosian, Legionnaire Hesperides hears the word. Dionysus. He feels... Something wrong? Asks Haliscus. The Salamander's launchmaster is looking at him quizzically. Hesperides shakes his head, moves closer. We should be alongside the 4th Legion supply ships in 103 seconds, Haliscus completes the sentence, then laughs, the gesture rattling slightly from the damage he still carries in his chest. A bad wound, one that he nearly did not survive. Hesperides looks at the sword that Haliscus still wears at his waist. He makes a decision. Draw your sword, he says, his voice low. What? Says Haliscus. If that is a new way to mock me, then you have hit new lows of both decorum and timing. Draw your sword, my friend. What is... The Storm Eagle that failed launch readiness is repaired? What? Are you going through some kind of cognition disturbance? The Storm Eagle. Is it flight ready? Yes, Haliscus says the word. Then a moment later goes still as the details of his friend's manner finally penetrate his awareness. He steps back from the launch status console. Behind him, the hangar bay is still and empty apart from the clicking steps of servitors. In less than 100 seconds, the Dracosian should be firing its thrusters to maneuver alongside one of the Iron Warrior's ships. Except it won't. In 5 seconds, the charges that Hesperides has set on the Dracosian's power transfer conduits will blow. No thrusters will fire. It will continue on, carried by momentum into the Iron Warrior's ship it was supposed to dock with. It is already too close for the Iron Warrior's ship to fire on once they realize what is happening. Draw the sword, Hesperides says again. The darkness shifts in the heart of Haliscus's eyes. The Salamander does not know that his legion has been betrayed, that there's a future of darkness and wars coming that he will not live to see. But he does know what this moment is. He does not ask for reasons. He draws a breath, settles, and places his hand on the hilt of his sword. He had been fast once. Death and silence fast. He is not fast now. The gears of his bionics click. Haliscus draws his blade. It's a beautiful movement. Hesperides will remember it. He will remember that arc of silver steel. He does not have regret. Regret is for those who believe that they have control over what they do. Hesperides does not believe he is anything more than a function of war. He does not know why he must do what he does. He does not need to. It is one of the first gifts that the Legion gave to him, freedom from needing to know. He shoots Haliscus. One pulse of Volkite from his Serpenta through the Salamander's skull. The bionics jam as dead nerves fire. The sword falls from the perfect arc of its cut. Ship impact alarms start to sound. The Dracosian hits prow on. The Iron Warrior's auxiliary ship Thrall of Olympus is twice the tonnage, and the guns studding its forward hull could rip the smaller ship from the void. Those guns are silent. It's expecting the Dracosian to dock, not to ram into it, and the ship is not braced for impact. In the Thrall of Olympus's docking bay, the cohort of Iron Warriors ready to take control of the Dracosian is waiting when the Dracosian hammers into the hull. The airlock doors buckle. The atmosphere in the docking bay explosively vents into the void. Some of the Iron Warriors maglock themselves to the deck. The rest spin into the dark. The Dracosian rams deep into the Iron Warrior ship, shunting it sideways. Their bridge crew on the Salamander's ship have no control. They're shouting Vox signals to the Thrall of Olympus. The Iron Warrior ship buckles and twists. The Dracosian, engine still burning, skids down the side of the larger ship. Turrets and void barbicans rip free. It slices across the keel like a serrated knife through the belly of a fish. The command tower of the Dracosian smashes into the Iron Warrior's ship, snags, then rips free. It's 50 meters tall. It brings away a chunk of hull 300 meters across. Fires start to burn in the wound as fuel and pressurized atmosphere meet. Then the fire finds something explosive and vital. The skin of the Iron Warrior's ship ripples with internal explosions. Then the reactor's breach and a white-hot sphere swallows it, and the Dracosian. Peck sees one of the Katura's data serfs flinch at their stations. An alert light is flashing red. Their hands start to move fast. "Ship collision," says the serf. Clave looks around. "Ships in severity?" It's the Dracosian and an Iron Warrior support craft, the Thrall of Olympus. High-speed impact, reactor breach, catastrophic explosion. "Shields up and brace," says Clave. "Get me a maneuver plot that puts us where we need to be in case of a cascade." The Iron Warrior's Delegatus is moving across the bridge, focused, intent. This is outside of the planned course of events. In one instant, the Iron Warrior's void plan has been disrupted. That, of course, is the point. Every ship from the first wave has been placed by design so that there is a gun to its head that it does not see. Larger craft have been corralled into lower orbit on the inside of spheres of second wave craft. They have nowhere to run except into the guns of their killers. It's a very careful piece of Void Fleet architecture. Peck would guess that as much as it is Forks' work as it is Perdurabo's. It has the Iron Warrior's first captain's signature of precision drudgery to it. "Update," the Iron Warrior's Delegatus is saying. He has moved through Clave's command officers as if they were not there, intent, shedding what diplomacy he has maintained. Clave is turning to him, fear of the Iron Warrior's legionary's physical presence warring with an ingrained instinct of a lifetime of command. Peck moves close, quick, unhurried. He does not need to check the position of his team on the bridge. He knows they are ready. Clave is forming a word. His tongue is moving. The urgent sound of orders and command systems is rising in volume and pitch. Peck brings his pistol up and fires. It is casual. Violence delivered with the same intent as reaching out to turn off a switch. Astartes grade power armor is as much a part of what makes the legions supreme in war as their bodies and minds. In fact, Peck has sometimes thought there is a case to be made that the alterations that are part of making a Space Marine are as much about creating a creature that can wear the battle plate as anything else. It can absorb and deflect damage that is lethal to baseline humans. Even powerful weapons have to be used differently to overcome its protection. Fire a bolt shell into the chest of a Space Marine, and the chance of immediate lethal effect is low. But like any defense, any system of war, such armor has weaknesses, edges, limits of the imagination of its makers and designers. Peck has studied those limits. He knows that on the modified Mark II plate, the armor covering the Vox bundle over each ear is thin. He knows that the launch and muzzle blast of a standard bolt round might shunt the head back before impact. The skull might fragment, but the result is not an immediate kill. There are other possibilities too. Peck has worked them through, both theoretical and practical. The Ultramarines would both approve his methodology and be appalled at the specifics. The round in the chamber of his bolt pistol is a modified armor penetrator with the rocket propellant reduced and the fragmentation load increased. Over a range of more than 5 meters, it will be ineffective, but Peck is not shooting from 5 meters. He's shooting from so close that the muzzle is millimeters from the ear node of the 4th Legion Delegatus, Grelth's helm. The round punches through armor, vox, and ear. It explodes in the skull. The helm contains the blast. The Iron Warrior does not hear the shot, he just drops. It is a dividing moment. Everything as it was before, then the shot, then the now. The shock that freezes Admiral Clave in place, the gunshot echo that swallows all the sound. Peck lowers the pistol. "Calm," he calls. The word is loud, amplified by his speaker grill. His legionnaires are next to the signal consoles in the Auxilia security details. They are still, guns up, sights and eyes focused. Movement ceases. Peck holsters the pistol, removes his helm. He looks at Clave. The Admiral's pupils have swallowed the color of his irises. Admiral, listen, believe what I tell you, and then do as I say. The second wave is with Horus. This is an ambush intended as a massacre. Holy shit. And wait, it gets better. Weapons discharged in the orbital sphere, shouts the Master of Auspex. Clave can hear the shock in her voice. She is called Islaid. She is a product of the Jovian Void clans like him. She has been in the Great Crusade for 23 years, frontline active. She's Fleet Command Cadre grade. Shock does not exist in her universe, any more than it does for him, but he can hear the shock all the same, can feel it rolling in his own heartbeat. Clave holds his gaze steady on Ingo Peck. There will be the engagement of primary targets in orbit, says the Alpha Legionnaire. Most likely the 19th and 18th Legion capital ships. Confirmed fire, iron blood to flame rot, calls an officer. Clave holds still. The thing that Peck has just told him is still echoing in his skull. Next, they will begin engaging ships of high priority and those that could pose a threat to the surface, says Peck. This ship, says Clave carefully, he feels cold now, as training and decades of war and command are taking over. They will not fire on this ship. Because your legion is with Horus, says Clave. Because they believe it is already under our control. Clave looks down at the corpse of the Iron Warrior's Delegatus on the deck. Blood is seeping from the hole in the side of the helm. Peck waits, perfectly still. He has not blinked. You do not control this ship, says Clave. He's angry now. You need to listen, Admiral, says Peck. Still calm, still as unruffled as a sail under a windless sky. There are options open to you, and by extension your crew and ship. You can choose to die here and now. You can shout across the Vox to the rest of the ships in orbit. You can run out your guns and target anything that you can see. This is likely what you are considering at this moment. Clave does not respond. It is exactly what he has been thinking. The only thing that has been holding him back is the presence of the Alpha Legion warriors on the command deck. Peck gives the smallest nod as though he is watching the turn of Clave's thoughts complete. More alerts and alarm noises are rising from stations across the bridge. That path will serve little, continues Peck. It's too late for a warning. The guns are already firing. Your words will add nothing, and then you and this ship will die. Clave snorts. Dying is what warriors do, he says. It is our duty. Only if death has a purpose. Otherwise, it has no purpose and serves only the pride of the dead. Is that how you see what you're doing? No. Sometimes what duty demands is worse than dying. We will not join you, and if you want this ship, then you will have to take it. Peck shrugs. Clave feels the question it asks. If we wanted your ship, what could have stopped us? Peck turns his head to look across the bridge. Most of the crew nearby drop their stares. Some glare back, trying to control the dread vibrating through them. Peck's gaze circles back to Clave, settles. You could try to pledge fealty to the rebellion, but we're not here to recruit you to the War Master's cause. Then what are you here for? To balance the future. The sound of alarms and priority signal alerts are a rising chorus now. Still nothing moves on the Katura's bridge. Some must survive that would not have. This is intended to be a massacre, Admiral. Our intent is that it is incomplete. So, next the Alpha Legion saboteurs cause all sorts of problems for the Iron Warriors in orbit, and a massive deck gun explodes as a shell jams when they open up on the Iron Hands. It's pretty awesome. More of that great infiltration like nobody else can pull off Alpha Legion level stuff. They're literally playing with all the other legions, it seems, having fun with it almost seems. And then, on the ground, as the Salamanders are making their way back to the Dropsite, in their retreat, just as they're meeting up with the Night Lords, who they still trust, the Alpha Legion has snipers in place. And they aren't shooting the Salamanders, they're shooting the Night Lords. Alpha Legion is on the field, but they're making sure they are seen doing their job while they're really helping the Loyalists. It's insane. But Peck's justification for what they're doing, as he explains it to Admiral Clave, is priceless. Survival, Admiral, says Peck. That is our objective. The man wants very much to kill him, Peck can tell, but Clave is a strategist, a campaigner. For all the shock that the animal part of his brain will be feeling, another part, the trained, rational part, will be looking for a way out, a way to get advantage, a way to keep fighting. Peck just needs that part to listen. No one is supposed to survive this, you understand. A galaxy without 3 legions, without 3 Primarchs. Complete annihilation. One of the crew nearby moans. It's a pathetic sound. Clave is breathing slowly, trying to see that course of action he so wants to take. A way to stay alive, a way to keep fighting. There is no way of preventing massacre, but annihilation can be denied. Peck pauses, leaves the promise hanging. How? Asks Clave at last. You will not have much time, says Peck. The chaos of the moment will keep the eyes of most of the hostile ships from you. The fact that there is supposed to be a Delegatus on board and myself will delay the question of why you are maneuvering out of the orbital sphere. They will presume that we have turned or that you have taken control of the ship? Just so, says Peck. But even with all that is happening, someone will notice you. When they do, they might try to get a response. Peck smiles then, but the expression holds no humor. When neither I or the Delegatus answers, they will start firing. Peck nods. Run for the deep. Go silent, shut down, drift, and wait. Wait for what? Clave asks. For the killing to be done. Then keep running? If you wish, but you might come back and see what remains. Survivors? It's a possibility. Peck turns away and begins to move towards the exit from the bridge. His escort falls in around him. Why are you doing this? Clave asks. Peck pauses and looks back, face as emotionless as a statue. For the Emperor, he says. Yes, the Alpha Legion is indeed making sure that the Loyalists have survivors, that the massacre of the Salamanders, Raven Guard, and Iron Hands does not turn into total annihilation of those legions. The extinction of the Primarchs and their legions was the intent of Horus, and the Alpha Legion got into position to make sure that didn't happen. They made sure that the loyalty they were known for stayed true. Ultimately, even if they had infiltrated Horus's camp so deeply they had no choice but to comply. Alpharius was part of planning the strategy for the War Master's entire plan. At every turn, the Alpha Legion is there, being loyal, mitigating losses, making sure that Horus isn't successful. And yes, they had to draw the blood of loyalist and traitor alike, because as the Emperor's infiltrators, as his spies and secret police, the Alpha Legion has the most dangerous job to do of all. I am convinced that the Ingo Peck that Clave is interacting with is actually Alpharius, as later in the story at the end, during Horus's triumph, he's there again, but is stated to be attending with Omegon. So we know Omegon is at the triumph, pretending to be Alpharius, as Horus doesn't know their secret and they dread him finding out. But the Legionnaire that is with him would be smaller a bit to be noticeable. And I do believe this is the real Peck, as earlier he did say that he was down to play whatever role that was required of him. Also, the way the Peck dealing with Clave says, for the Emperor, it made me think of when Alpharius said that to Namet Jira. I believe the Primarch is the one that gave Hesperides the code word Dionysus. It would be so appropriate, as we've seen Ingo Peck pretend to be Alpharius on multiple occasions, so to see Alpharius pretending to be Peck is fun. I got a good laugh out of it at least, though in typical Alpha Legion fashion, it is highly alluded to, but not explicitly stated to be the case. We're meant to pick up on it, but it isn't absolutely 100% confirmed. Hydra Dominatus. Peck keeps his helmet on as he follows Omegon towards where the War Master waits. He's not been long on the ground and will not remain long either. There are a few matters he has to attend to, a few opportunities that need to be seized, and the effectiveness of a number of mission parameters assessed. Overall, the result is what they anticipated, and the fact that a significant, if fragmented element of the 10th, 18th, and 19th Legions survive will be valuable. He does not like what he sees here, though. He does not like the warriors so drowned in gore and soot that they look as though they have been wading in pitch. He does not like the cadre of the Emperor's children following Fulgrim, who are dragging devices that look more like fusions of sonic machines and flesh than weapons. He does not like the stillness of Horus waiting for them all like a king of old. He does not like any of it, but in war, Victory comes to those who make best use of all weapons. The Alpha Legion proved to me that beyond all expectations and suppositions about them, they are indeed loyal to the core, for the Emperor. Now, there have been strong hints in the lore in the past that one twin was staying loyal and one traitor, and that they did this with full awareness of what they were doing to be able to act, plan, and prepare for any situation while manipulating the outcome to their advantage. But that's just another facade. The 20th have been playing a role, or roles, but the roles aren't what I thought they were. They're the loyalist who is pretending to be the traitor, and the loyalist pretending to be a traitor, pretending to be a loyalist, pretending to be a traitor. To the core, the Alpha Legion are able to do whatever the Imperium requires. They got inside Horus's rebellion, they helped plan it, assuring that there was ways that some of the loyalists survived, and the legions endured. And that to me is absolutely ballsy. People often liken the Alpha Legion to the CIA or MI6 or other intelligence agencies like that. But to me, they're more like the Army's ISA, Intelligence Support Activity. And many of their operations actually remind me of the US Navy's extremely controversial Red Cell, the unit that was established to attack our own bases to illustrate security flaws and how easily they could be exploited. I would bet that the Black Library writers leaned heavily into these organizations and how they work when they were designing the 20th Legion and fleshing out the lore beyond those early Index Astartes articles in White Dwarf. So what do you guys think? Are the Alpha Legion truly just traitors? Or are they playing the most dangerous game of all? Does the death of Hiliscus by Hesperides show they'll do anything to do the Emperor's will? Or was that an act of total treachery? Or both? Hiliscus did die with his sword in his hand, a warrior's death. He'll make it to Valhalla, that's for sure. He's no Kash Patel. To me, sure, they had to kill a few salamanders, but it took out a massive chunk of the Iron Warrior's fleet's capability and did massive damage to the traitor's cause. One thing that we know for sure now, seeing into the minds of the Alpha Legion's Primarchs as they spoke with Horus, is they're working against the War Master. And no matter how anyone else sees them, that's irrelevant, because truth and lies are just tools to the Alpha Legion. If the Space Wolves or the Ultramarines, the Raven Guard, or whoever see them as traitors, that's something they can deal with, they can live with, because the Legion will do what the Primarchs say, and the Primarchs do what they do for one reason, and one reason alone. They do it for the Emperor. Fidelitas Imperialis, brothers. Hydra Dominatus. Alpharius has methods that are much different than those of his brothers. It's no secret that he was disliked by the other Primarchs, but it wasn't because he couldn't keep up. It was because he was running circles around them. But, in typical Alpha Legion fashion, Alpharius uses this fact not to ingratiate himself with his fellow sons of the Emperor, but to strengthen his hold on his legion, and assure their continued loyalty to him going forward, no matter how unorthodox his future orders would appear to be. For of all the weapons the 20th Primarch taught his sons to use, it is the truth itself with which they are most proficient. And Alpharius, the last Primarch, is the deadliest wielder of the truth of all. In this video, we'll look at the events of the Testra Compliance, when the War Master Horus dispatched Rabute Guilliman and his Ultramarines alongside the newly discovered Alpha Legion and its Primarch Alpharius, from the short story Council of Truth by Mike Brooks. Basically, this story is told through two lenses. There are some boots-on-the-ground viewpoints during the Compliance itself, but most of the story is told in hindsight, as a council of Space Marines sit in a semicircle asking questions of their Primarch. This is a ritual they partake in to keep everyone on the same page and on the up and up, so to speak. The Council of Truth, where anything may be asked and all answers are to be given with as little personal bias as possible in order for the Legion to parse truth from fact. And if you don't know the difference between truth and fact, then please watch Raiders of the Lost Ark. After you finish this video, of course. Dr. Jones explains it rather well. So some really unorthodox decisions were made by the Alpha Legion's Primarch during the battles that forced the Testra Compliance, which was when the Imperium's Space Marines came upon a conglomerate of planets and systems that had about 11 billion people and had survived since the Age of Strife as their own culture. They had no intention of joining the Imperium, so Horus sent the Ultramarines and the Alpha Legion to bring them to heel. And it was one of those situations where Horus was unaware that the Alpha Legion were S++ tier Foxhound on the boss extreme. He thought they were noobs and needed the Ultramarines to show them what to do. And Rabute assumed the same thing as well. And this caused a huge problem for Guilliman. He was bragging that he could take the worlds within a few months, but as we see at the Council of Truth, Alpharius accomplished it within weeks, with minimal loss of life, total surprise, and against the express orders of Guilliman, who had forgotten that Alpharius was his brother, his equal, and not merely just some Astartes to be ordered about. So the council was set up like this. Alpharius on a chair, in a plain chamber, with several benches organized in a semicircle facing him. There were 3 legionnaires before the Primarch, who was helmeted, each one in extremely unadorned and plain power armor, and the Primarch wore the Pythian scales. They asked Alpharius why he didn't work alongside Guilliman, and he had some interesting things to say. My point is that it is easy for Rabute to proclaim himself a mighty general when his troops obey his orders quickly, without question, and are singularly capable in all aspects of open warfare. He thinks that off the back of this fact, he can forge a legacy that will endure, that he can set down a method which any commander can follow and achieve the same results as he has. But he has not been tested against a superior adversary. The Primarch sighs as if regretful. One day, Rabute may face an enemy that will not engage him in the manner of warfare that he knows. His Ultramarines, the pale imitations of him that they are, may find themselves without his guidance, or find that what guidance he has left them is insufficient for the task. What will they do then, when the dogma they clasp so close to their hearts has failed them? When the commands do not come, or perhaps more worryingly, their commander cannot be trusted? Will their spirit break? Perhaps, and perhaps not. But will they adapt? Of that, I am more doubtful. They will need to learn new warfare from first principles, and while they attempt that, they will be cut to ribbons. So, we see Alpharius doesn't think much of Guilliman's methods. He uses this situation to train his men, as he constantly does, in new ways of fighting. And the Testra are people who are very, very capable. They have very good commanders who are intense and single-minded in their duty to protect their people. They're led by a general who is awoken by an alarm, battle stems immediately pumped into her system, and slips immediately into a pressed uniform. Her reasoning is that her face is recognizable, but her uniform is even more so. Thus, if someone hesitates a microsecond after she gives an order because their mind lags as they put together the woman screaming at them is the general, it might be detrimental to the battle. So she was always ready to go with her uniform, even during a red alert, get out of bed now, the world is ending situation, like they ended up in. I felt bad for the Testra. They were human and just wanted to live their own way, although they were a strict caste system. Whatever role you were born into, that was your role for life. There was no promotion, no demotion, only stagnation. And they were too reliant upon the grunts of their rank-and-file soldiers, who weren't too smart, as they were Ogrins. Capable as all hell when set to extremely simple tasks, but they could only hold one thought at a time. Hold the line. Sure, they could do that. Kill all the enemies. They could do that too. But clear this building, then move on to the next and clear it too, consolidate and rendezvous here. Nope, that's way more than their pea-brains could handle. So the point of these councils of truth was so that the Legion could have a clear idea of events as they occurred. And more importantly, the intentions of leadership. The anonymity of the Legionnaires that met with the Primarch was to assure that no biases were taken into account, that the Primarch was accountable to every person in his legion the same. And that was a big deal. And this was even often extended to the humans who worked for the Legion. Not many other legions show that level of respect to the base humans who serve them, loyal or traitor. Guilliman chewed his way through several of the Testra worlds before Alpharius even got started. And when he did, it was almost just a tease. He flew past their defenses with his entire fleet and went straight for the jugular, to the capital city of their capital world, metropolis of many millions called Prime. And he laid siege to the city. They bolstered their defenses, they drilled, they reinforced everything, and prepared diligently. The Testra were ready for the attack, and the Alpha Legion just waited, probing here and there, launching little raids. But then they pulled off their own classic shenanigans, and they destroyed the Testra in some horrendous ways. First, they had infiltrated their command and had psycho-conditioned a colonel to pull out his pistol and waste the other members of High Command before putting it to his own head and doing himself in. And the moment he did that, stopping their command from functioning entirely, the Alpha Legion opened up. 1,000 attacks at once, each one deadly, decisive, immediate, and unexpected. Agents of the Legion had already infiltrated deep. The saddest part was the Ogrins in the end, with nobody to tell them what to do, and the last order they received being to follow the command units. They got cut down like wheat. Sikaran tanks wasted them as they stood there, unable to respond as they hadn't been ordered to fight back. It was that sad and pathetic. In the end, 60 million people died, and Testra fell into Imperial compliance. Guns fell silent on many worlds, and the Ultramarines' slow, grinding wars of attrition came to a quick and decisive halt. So the other Legionnaires questioning Alpharius during the council are asking why they didn't just immediately go in and destroy the city of Prime since it was within the Legion's power. Why play the game and take weeks of setting the stage for some great event? Why all the theatrics and subterfuge? Alpharius says he was asked the same thing by Guilliman, and he told him that it would have been too easy. Alpharius is the kid who got bullied and underestimated by his brothers, but they're projecting as he's actually and obviously much more capable than most of them, even at their own specialties. Just an observation, and why he's the greatest Primarch. The Legion used this entire Testra situation to train, to learn new ways of adapting and overcoming adverse situations. Alpharius prides himself on being a general who can adapt, be flexible, and take the fight to any enemy, even stronger and more capable forces, because he's smarter and unpredictable. He thinks Guilliman sees the art of warfare as something that can be codified, that his way is the best and only way, but it isn't, and that will be Guilliman's undoing one day. That he will always assume he's the greater military mind and genius, and nobody can best him. But Alpharius finds that thinking ironic, as Guilliman's blind spot is so obvious to his own astute observations. But that's often the problem with Primarchs. Their major blind spot is themselves, and when it comes to self-awareness, they are often extremely lacking. I'd say that it is doubly ironic, then, that this also applies to the Hydra as well. But he lets his Legion, through the Council of Truth, know that sure, they could have owned the Testra capital within hours, but did it slowly, in weeks, with minimal loss of Legion personnel and materials, all to make a point, to learn, to train, to try out new, extreme, and flexible tactics. Because Alpharius wanted his Legion to be able to function without him, if need be, to operate on its own, not dependent on the chain of command, and yet still capable of getting the job done. And this empowers the Legionnaires. They feel like they're treated as equals. They feel like they got the truth of events and intentions behind them, and that their Primarch was being transparent with them. And on the surface, it does seem so. Alpharius is regretful at the right moments, and he's also arrogant at the right moments, and sure pleased with his own genius. He gets personal and strips away all pretense between himself and his Legion. He's not the son of the Emperor in that moment, not their gene father. He's just one of the homies, and he's being real. And the icing on the cake is that they use this all to gloat about how the Ultramarines are clueless and won't be able to keep up in the future as they are inflexible. Alpharius reminds them that the Alpha Legion is the last line of defense for mankind. It must endure, even if the Raven Guard, the Iron Warriors, and any other legions fade away or are destroyed. The Alpha Legion must make contingency plans to make sure the Legion endures. They must outsmart everyone. They must outplay everyone, must win every game because they've rigged it ahead of time. Alpharius is by far the most ambitious Primarch, the most arrogant and possibly even the most narcissistic, other than Fulgrim. He thinks a lot of his own genius and holds himself in the highest regard. But he knows that it isn't how he perceives himself that matters, but how his father sees him. As he notes, the Primarchs are tools, and twice before, the tools of the Emperor were found to be wanting, found ineffective, broken, or otherwise in need of discarding. What a blunt, non-poetic way to describe the loss of the Primarchs of the 2nd and the 11th Legions. And from such an otherwise imaginative mind. I think it speaks to how little he really wants to think about that. All the Primarchs seem to have a serious problem with thinking about the Forgotten and the Purged. Alpharius is no different. I mean, he was even there when Malcador choked Horus out, along with the Khan. So Alpharius, not wanting to fade into obsolescence, or be seen as lesser than any of his brothers, resorts to extreme measures to assure that he and his legion are not erased. That's where this all comes from. Now, we can't take anything he says in Head of the Hydra as fact, even if they may be full of truths. So, we can't operate on the assumption that the 20th Primarch was indeed the first found and raised on Terra in secret by the Emperor. That story might not be true at all. So we have to look at the Legion the way the rest of the Space Marines would. They're the newcomer, the last found Primarch, the last Legion deployed to prosecute the Emperor's Great Crusade, and spread the Imperial truth throughout the stars. They haven't chalked up all those wins that the other Legions have. They've been officially, at least, unleashed for the least amount of time of any Legion. Though they have a massive fleet and their own Gloriana-class battleship, the Alpha, they're unknown. But that's really just to the other Legions. Alpharius knows they were conducting false flag operations for a long time, operating as the Ghost Legion before he met with the War Master Horus and was introduced to the galaxy officially. And he knows that will mean something to his father, the Master of Mankind, whether his brothers know of it or not. Alpharius is the spook of spooks. He's a spy to the core, through and through. So he's not going to open his mouth about it to his brothers, even if the events of the Head of the Hydra are true, even if he's truly the first found, the actual Alpha, not just ironically named that in mockery. So the Council of Truth disbands, satisfied with the new insights they gleaned from questioning the Primarch. They get up and leave, each in turn, to return to their normal duties and don their normal armor that denotes rank and who they are and whatnot. But the last one lingers in the chamber and has a few more questions for the Primarch. Alpharius removes his crested helm and it's actually Omegon under the helmet. Not that anyone but one of them could tell the difference. They're identical in every way. But then the Legionnaire removes his helmet too and it is the identical face. Literally Omegon pretending to be Alpharius, explaining Alpharius' actions to an anonymous Legionnaire, one of which turned out to be Alpharius. Totally Alpha Legion and totally awesome. Pretty fun twist too, I thought. But Alpharius wants to know if Omegon was telling the truth, and Omegon says that he did, or at least as much truth as was necessary. It was pretty sick actually, and well played. As much as necessary. But we can see the brothers playing coy and dancing around the fact that they've chosen opposite sides in the grand scheme of things, acknowledging it and avoiding it in the same breath. It's a pretty badass dynamic between them, actually. To the Alpha Legion, the truth is a weapon to be wielded, just as is the lie. Control of the Legion and maintaining their loyalty is done through manipulating perception as much as anything else, and controlling how information is received and incorporated into the Legion's agenda. Alpharius knows Omegon is working against him, as seen in the Seventh Serpent. But that remains unacknowledged and something they dance around. That's just politics, essentially. They're still twins and share similar tastes in most things. So it's fun to see them working together to manipulate the Legion in its perspective of the Primarchs, even if ultimately they are at odds behind the scenes. Another awesome Alpha Legion story some of the best Warhammer lore out there, tying directly into the old Horus Heresy Black Books and Alpharius Head of the Hydra. I highly recommend reading Council of Truth. It's mostly intrigue at court kind of stuff, but there's plenty of action too. If you're a self-identifying son of the Hydra like I am, then this one is a must-read.